Thank you for staying with us on the AM show. Time now for us to get into our big stories. And the main one, the first one we're getting into, Ghana's economy. We'll have experts discuss how government can make things better, so to speak. Yesterday, of course, we had that pre-budget conversation, and a lot of them, from Guta to the AGI to industry, shared their thoughts. Well, joining us for that conversation, we have Professor John Gachi, who is Dean, University of Cape Coast School of Business. We also have Charles Appiah, Executive Secretary, Edum Business Community. Also joining the conversation, Alfred Amofa. He is CEO of Western Dedel. That is the One District, One Factory project. All of them join the conversation. Gentlemen, just to ensure that all of you can hear me and that I can hear from you, a very good morning.
Good morning.
I just heard Professor Gachi, I believe. Can I hear from my other guests? All right, so we'll try to work the connections. But Professor Gachi, so even as we talk about the economy, I'm sure you followed the Kume Preko demonstration, and yes, people were complaining about the very same economy. I'd like to find out from you, between the last time we had an interaction, which is, I think, over a month ago, and now, what is the picture you see when it comes to our economy? The Cedi has appreciated against the dollar. That is very important. It's still hovering around 13 cedis. There's also the inflationary rate. We don't know what October will bring in terms of, because we don't have that figure yet. But when you look at the economy, the last time we spoke and now, are we doing any better? Are we faring any better in any respect?
Well, it's difficult to say that we are doing well. All the indicators point to distressed economy, and calling for pragmatic measures to be able to turn things around. I think that is what we should be discussing about the economy. Momentary respite for the currency is not anything to celebrate. It doesn't change anything in the price window for goods and services in the country. So I think that we should be focusing on what we should do to ensure that our economy churn out outcomes that we expect to inure to revenue generation, to inure to lower food prices, lower transport costs for households and workers, and also to moderate the business environment for our entrepreneurs. That we have not achieved in the last 1 month. And the other aspect is that we have also not achieved policy announcements that resonate with the business environment and the people. That is also lacking now. And that provides a lot of signal that would drive corporate policy and strategy formulation going forward. And that gap ought to be filled as early as possible, because apart from the fiscal calendar for the country, corporate entities have their own calendar going into 2023. We are starving them of the needed policy direction to plan and execute their broad strategies.
Speaking of which, especially as you talk about planning and all of that, we've had our budget reading. Of course, normally you would peg it at November the 15th, per what we know, per what the framework stipulates to have our budget reading. But this year, that is not going to happen, especially on the back of our negotiations with the IMF. How problematic is that? Is it problematic? Is it going to lead to any shocks in our economy, especially for business?
Well, I think it's problematic because as a country, we should show some fidelity to our rules and work within that framework. We do know that per the Public Financial Management Act, let me just say October is the month that Cabinet is supposed to finish up their consideration of the budget.
Right.
If they have any think that will revise the budget, they make that available to the finance minister and the budget department of Ministry of Finance to factor into the revision of the budget from cabinet. Then within 2 weeks after the maximum period of the end of October from cabinet, the minister is supposed to now present the revised budget from cabinet to parliament for consideration. And parliament also has up to 31st December to debate on the budget and make sure that they firm up the policy guidance in the budget, the revenue direction, the expenditure framework, and the borrowing agenda of the government and specific programs, projects, and activities that will also inform corporate entities as to how to feed into the budget information. So that is very, very clear. There is no allowance as to whether you can sidestep the calendar provided in the Public Financial Management Act, and the inability to present the budget as scheduled, and that have been followed by all finance ministers in the past. One may say that then the base has not been worked on. That is, cabinet has not done its work, because if cabinet has done its work, then there is no need to be using the IMF negotiation as an excuse, because this is not the first time we are going into an IMF program under the 1992 Constitution. The IMF program can be engaged at any point in time and can be factored into the budget at any point in time. We have done that severally. So there's no reason to cite the IMF program as the reason for which we cannot present a budget. That is defeating our public financial management rules.
Right. Thank you for those initial submissions. Just hold for me. Let me also bring in Charles Appiah, Executive Secretary with the Edum Business Community. Let me find out from you, as far as Edum is concerned, we know that, for example, Guta members in the Ashanti region at a point shut their shops. It was replicated in Accra. But what has business been like in recent times? And what would you say the current situation is for you?
All right. Good morning to you and to your viewers. The association is Ashanti Business Owners Association, ABUA.
Right. My apologies for that. My apologies for that.
It's well placed. All right. So the general view of business in Ashanti region, as we all know, price of items are going high. Disposable incomes has also been depleted because of inflation. So generally, sales of items have gone down, and there's economic slowdown within our business market. So basically, this is the outlook of Ashanti businesses, and I think it's replicated itself across the whole country.
And how has that impacted you, especially within the last 6 months, for example, looking at the dollar to Cedi rate? There was a bit of a joke. I shouldn't call it a joke. It's a serious matter. At the Kumi Preko demonstration, there was a placard hoisted where someone had written that the Bank of Ghana has the dollar rate, but Abochi has the dollar. You know, just to play on the fact that the reality when it comes to business, the pegging of the Cedi to the dollar and other major currencies is really not so much within the hands of the powers that be. Is that your situation in the last 6 months? How have you coped with the dollar to Cedi, pegging?
We have earlier indicated how the dollar has affected our working capital. In the early years of 2022, dollar was hovering around 6.5. So if I need $100,000, I need almost about 650,000 Ghana cedis to do that. Today, dollar ranges about 14.5% to a dollar. That means I need about 1.5 million Ghana cedis to get same $100,000.
The Bank of Ghana, pardon my coming in, but the Bank of Ghana, the last time I checked, it pegs the dollar at 13 cedis, just around 13 cedis, a little over 13 cedis too.
Just like you earlier indicated, BOG will have their rates, but the market dictates what rate must be used. If you decide to transact business as of yesterday, rate that was selling in the market was 14.5.
Wow.
So that's the reality on the ground. So these has actually depleted our working capital, and you also know that Bank of Ghana somewhere last month also increased policy rate by 250 basis points. That increases policy rate by 2.5%, and the interest rate in bank goes about 30%, and lending is about 35%. That has actually also made cost of borrowing much more higher now as we speak. Fuel prices have gone high beyond the roofs, making everything that concerns our business much more expensive. And you remember in the president's speech, he talked about the market women telling him that people are overhiking prices. And I always say that is not the truth. When you go to the port, as of 2 weeks ago, we're clearing goods at about 100,000 Ghana cedis. As we speak now, it's over 300,000 Ghana cedis.
How long ago was this? How long ago was this when you were clearing for 100,000?
It's about 2 weeks ago.
Wait, hold on. You're telling me 2 weeks ago you were clearing at 100,000 and now you're clearing, similar goods for 300,000 cedis?
That's right.
Wow. What kinds of goods are we talking about?
We're looking at the consumables, the rice, the sugar, the sardines, the daily consumables that we are talking about. Things are far, far much more expensive now. And these are also influenced by the forex hikes. Because when you clear your goods and it's indexed in dollars, obviously when your city is not doing well, prices will obviously go high. So the outlook of businesses is not the best of time for us. So no one takes the pride in increasing prices because we are aware of the situation we are in. But it's the dictates of the economic indicators that influence prices in the market. That is where the situation is now.
Wow, those are some telling, Charles, I see you wanted to wrap. Just do that and then I'll go to Alfred.
What I just want to end up with, the principle of basic business is that a business more obviously will pass on the cost to the final consumer. So if prices are hiking, it means there are some factors influencing that. It's not the businessman overpricing its items. Far from that.
So you disagree with the president when he said that you should be measured in the profits you seek? You disagree with the president?
I won't say absolutely, but the fact is generally goods are high, and no one is profiteering. With this situation, we are in Ghana. The only thing we can support ourselves is how best can we make things affordable, at least to achieve the UN SDG goals, that people can have access to food.
Okay.
So no one wants to do that. If the president probably will avert itself through the current economic challenges, I think you probably will not make that statement again.
Let me bring in Alfred Amofa, who is CEO Western Dedel. It's a one district, one factory beneficiary. Alfred, you have benefited from the one district, one factory program. I just want to find out from you, how have these economic times impacted your output, first of all? Hello, Alfred. Can you hear me? All right, so I'll try to we'll try to work the connection again to Alfred Amofa, CEO Western Dedel. It's a one district, one.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Alfred, I can hear you now. Did you get my question?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
You wanted to find out how this situation in the economy has impacted our business.
Yes, please. So first of all, Western Dedel, what do you do? What do you produce?
Yeah, Western Dedel is a giant in the local rice production. We produce rice, we process it, and we market it. So we are a complete value chain specialist in the rice value chain, from cultivation of the raw material to market milled rice. That's what.
Okay, and how big is your output? It's interesting to put it into context, especially as Mr. President has been talking about, reducing our imports and increasing our exports. How much rice do you produce, let's say in a year? I think we're still struggling with the connection to Alfred. Maybe we can just pick his sound and hopefully, or maybe reach him via the phone lines. Maybe, just maybe. But it would be interesting to get some of those other details when it comes to their productivity or production levels and what the impact has been. But let me come back to Professor Gachi. So looking at some of the dynamics, I want to quickly go back to the Cedi dollar and other hard currency pegging. Like it's Charles has mentioned, the Bank of Ghana can have its rate. Just this morning or so, I saw a pop-up on Twitter alerting me to its rates. It's just around 13 cedis. Yet, when you go out there, and some Forex Bureau have been shut, but when you go out there, it's a different story altogether. You heard Charles make mention of the fact that just 2 weeks ago, the duty they had to pay was around 100,000. Now it's about 300,000. I believe it is dollars. Charles, correct me if I'm wrong. Were you speaking dollars or cedis?
Oh, this is cedis.
All right, so 300,000 cedis, from 100,000 to 300,000 cedis. What is your take on this? Are we getting the monetary policy right? Are we getting the actions to stymie the dollar against the cedi right? Prof.
Well, I think there are about three issues there. The Bank of Ghana has what we call indicative rate. And the problem we face is that the indicative rate, the difference between the indicative rate and the market rate that people face on daily basis is too distant away. And that the Bank of Ghana must recognize. So that is why some people make the mistake and assume that that is a sort of policy exchange rate by the Bank of Ghana. But the Bank of Ghana actually provides indicative rate. But the Bank of Ghana should get closer to the market so that the difference between its indicative rate and the market rate that the people face on daily basis will not be too wide away. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that the whole thing is about demand and supply. So if your indicative rate is around 13 cedis, but you don't have the ability to supply the volume that the market needs, then that shortage would drive up price in the real market situation for people who need the dollar that you don't have the ability to supply. So that is the other thing happening. And we need to look at those factors. What we should do to ensure that if there is an indicative rate, we are able to supply a certain quantity that will not bring too much difference in the market. So these are the, I believe, the observable challenges that we have. So one cannot say that the monetary policy situation is totally bad. I believe the monetary policy should be anchored in an effective fiscal policy and a good productive environment. The monetary policy cannot be standing alone. That is a challenge we are facing in Ghana. Our productive efficiency is low. And in addition to that, our fiscal management undermines monetary policy effectiveness. So until that cordial and effective coordination takes place between fiscal management and monetary policy formulation and management, monetary policy will always seem to be underperforming.
So it's interesting you make these points because Mr. President, in his address on the economy, also touched on the bit about reducing our imports, increasing our exports. Interestingly, even the products, three of our major products that we export, I'm talking about cocoa, I'm talking about gold, I'm talking about crude, have depreciated by about 0.9% from the latest data that we have. So speaking of the level of production, you say, quote, productive efficiency is low in our country. But it's not something that we can just, industrializing is not something that we can just, in one fell swoop execute. It would take years, if not maybe a decade. So how do we go about it in the short term to achieve some of those targets? What do we do?
Well, it's all about economic management leadership. We are aware 30 years ago about dwindling nature of our productivity. We are aware about 30 years ago that we are relying more on import. We are aware, if not 30 years, about 20 years ago, that even most of our staple, we are becoming net importers of our staple food. The question we should ask ourselves is that what policy have we put in place to address that? There is none. So that is the beginning point. Last year, when you were discussing about the currency, you heard the same thing, that long term. When would the long term start? Long term start with leadership now. So if we don't have anything on the table, dealing with the fact that we wouldn't want to import 400 million worth of tomatoes from a desert country like Burkina Faso, then why is the policy to address that? That is where the leadership comes in. So I think all boiled down on the leadership in managing the economy. We have not seen that leadership very clearly in identifying selected imported items that we want to take hold of them and ensure that we don't import them. Even if we are going to import them, we don't import them in that magnitude. I listened to a lecture recently where the presenter from Israel indicated that for them, 95% of their food items are domestically produced and 5% imported. What is our policy? So that is where the issue has to be tackled. Let the government showcase the policies. What the item we are importing in Aboso Kai and Co., how many of them that we think we can fabricate in Ghana, coordinating and collaborating with KNUSC, for example, and magazines and co in the country? Where is the policy? I think that is the question we should be asking. When those policies are there, the next level is questioning the commitment strategy in terms of implementation. Then we know we are following a roadmap. But as it is, we only come together when we are facing challenge, and we try to talk about this issue of long term, and there's no beginning point of the long term. So that it's like we are only interested in telling ourselves what our problem is, but we are not interested in actually resolving them.
Right. Let me go back to Alfred Amofa, CEO of Western Daredevil. Alfred, thank you for rejoining the conversation. I was asking about your level of productivity every year. What can you share with us?
Thank you very much. As I indicated earlier on, we are into production of rice, local rice processing and marketing. So we do every part of rice, from the cultivation from the soil till it gets to your bowl. And we are happy to inform you that we produce one of the best rice in the world. Now, looking at how this situation has impacted our productivity.
Before you get to the productivity, I'm asking that direct question for a reason. How many tons do you produce? How many tons of rice do you produce in a year?
Averagely, we are doing about 10,000 metric tons in a year.
10,000 metric tons.
Yes,
okay.
But I think this year has been quite a difficult year because we also work with outgrowers, and most of our outgrowers could not cultivate this year because of increasing cost of input, fertilizer, seed, weedicide, and the like. And I can tell you, in the South district that we work, close to about 70% of our outgrowers could not cultivate rice this year, obviously because of the factors I have earlier on enumerated. So the situation is quite dire, and if something is not done immediately, it could lead to a total shutdown of the productive sector the economy, and that could have a serious consequence for an already bad situation.
All right, so you were beginning to talk about the impact. Has enough been done to mitigate the economic turmoil that you as an industry are facing, Western Daredevil?
Not really. I think that I cannot pinpoint anything right now that government have done that seems to be working for us. But like I said, I have indicated the various aspects of our production lines, the seed, the fertilizer, the chemicals. All these have seen serious increases in the prices, and therefore we are not able to produce at the previous levels. And as we speak, a lot of people have now understood the concept of local rice, but they are calling and we are unable to provide them. It's quite a bad situation, though. But what can we do? Like all the other speakers have earlier on said, the working capital is going down because of increasing in the cost of production. So I think that is it. Let me also touch a bit on 1D1F. I think you've mentioned it, and Prof also touched a bit on that one. I think the policy of 1D1F, as I have indicated earlier on, is a good one. There was a policy to see how best we can industrialize, add value to the raw material, and gradually get out of this importation business. I think government showed some commitment in the first term of its government, but the implementation has always been the challenge. The needed capital that was supposed to be given to these companies to do what is expected of us was never given. Government relied on the so-called partner banks to do this, but I can tell you on authority that partner banks have failed government big time, and this is a conversation no one is willing to have. What was the role of these banks in the whole 1D1F policy? Have they lived to expectation? As I speak here, the answer is no. They did not. Where the amount of money they promised to pump into it, they have not done so. So, for example, Western Daredevil have built an ultra-modern processing plant in Agona that has everything in rice processing. But the issue now is the raw material. We saw this from afar. That is why in our proposal to our partner banks, we needed an X amount. That amount was reduced quite drastically. And because of that, we have the factory, but you don't have enough funds, enough raw material to be able to feed this factory and cut down rice importation. And the situation is like that for a lot of other 1D1F companies I know. The problem is raw material. The raw material to feed these companies, it's not there. Generally, the productive sector in the agricultural sector is generally low. You produce only during the rainy season, and half of the year you're not doing anything. If this is the situation, there's no way we are going to develop. What I think can be done is, in the 2023 budget, government should create space for agricultural financing, serious one, so that you can produce in large quantities. Then you can add the value that was earlier on envisaged. Then this issue of cutting down imports can be realized. But as it stands now, the local companies do not have the strength, the capability to feed the nation. And it's not because we don't have the knowledge or you don't have the land and the climate. It's because of purely it's a finance issue. Banks are not willing to finance agricultural companies. And government is also not doing much in that area. That is why the situation is like what we can see right now.
All right, so two quick questions I want you to just look at very quickly so we can move on. So you're saying government has not done enough. You are a beneficiary of the One District, One Factory program. How would you assess it then? On a scale of 1 to 10, would you say it has succeeded? Has it failed? Where 1 is the lowest and 10 is the highest, what rating would you give 1D1F from your experience?
So let me say that before I give my rating. What government has done is, one, to give you import subsidy. If you're importing anything in relation to your company, government pays a subsidy for you.
Right.
Again, when you get a bank that is willing to finance you, government will pay half of the interest rate. So if the interest rate is 20%, government will pay 10% for you.
Right.
This is what is all in it for 1D1F company, so far as I'm aware. But the critical issue is, will the banks agree to give you the loan? It is after they have given you the loan that government will come in to pay half of the interest rate. However, if they say they will not give you the loan, and in most cases, they have refused to give us the loan, or even the amount and the time you need it. So what government has done is good, but I think that the critical issue has not been answered by government.
All right,
So
before you give your rating, we have to be fair. The Agri Minister has said time and again, he has called on the banks to be more open to giving loans to you, the farmers. We do know that of all the loans that the banks give, about 4% goes to farmers. That is a drop in the bucket. And even with that 4%, about 90% of that, from if memory serves, goes to the cocoa buying companies. So it has really shrunk funding coming to you. But you cannot say that it is for a lack of effort. I've heard the Agri Minister time and again asking banks to do this. But at the same time, on the other end, just to chip in, the public sector, government is also crowding out businesses by going to these same local banks. But something is being done, right?
Oh, surely, certainly something is being done. I think the policy itself of 1D1F is a great thing that government started. So I will not say nothing has been done at all. Only that the critical aspect of the issue has not been tackled. Financing. How do we get finances for these agri-businesses to expand? That's the question we all need to answer. And so we get to that answer, these issues we've been talking about year in, year out, there's no forward. We are not going anywhere with this conversation until the critical issue of agri-financing is solved in this country. My brother, let's forget it. We will talk from morning to evening. It cannot be done because we are an agricultural country. We have the comparative advantage in agriculture. And if you are a company and you are not strengthening where you have the ability and you are doing other things, you can be sure that your productivity will be very low. So till we come to terms of the fact that Ghana is an agrarian country and we put enough resources into agribusiness, we are not going anywhere.
What is your ranking then of 1D1F, your rating on a scale of 1 to 10?
Oh, I can give government 6.
6.
6.
All right.
I think government did its part, coming in with the policy, other incentives like the import duty, paying half of interest rate, but the partner banks failed government. And I think going forward, government should embark on aggressive raw material production for 1D1F company. There should be another program that seeks to accelerate the production of raw materials for 1D1F companies. And I think that's the way to go. If we're able to do that, within 1 year, I can see we can turn things around. Because from April, the new planting season is starting. So we have from now to April to plant something. If you're able to plant very well, from April, if you're able to expand our farms, by year today, you will not be talking as we are talking today. Things might have been much better. So I urge government to go ahead to ban the importation. It may create some difficulty for now. You should go ahead and ban it, make funds available so that from March, April next year, when the planting season starts, some of us and other of our colleagues can expand our farms.
Okay.
And once we have the factories, we can now process and make these products available for the consuming public and save our dying economy and city.
Mr. Appiah, for you come from the business community. Do tell me, what do you think can be done in anticipation of the budgetary reading, in anticipation of what measures we can use from the monetary policy to everything else to stabilize what you do, business? How do you think this can be done in respect of taxation and levies? We have the E-levy that some have complained about. We have the E-VAT. We have so many others. And some have said that they don't want any additional taxes in budget 2023. On that score, what do you think can be done to ease the burden of the business community? Hello, Charles.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Go ahead.
That, yes. So the three main causes of inflation, that the demand pull, we have the cost push, and the inflation expectation. In Ghana, I would root out demand pull because our inflation is not caused by excess supply of liquidity or money in the market. It's rather cost push. If cost of production, cost of doing business is very high, obviously it becomes a burden to the businessman and to the final consumer. What we are looking for is how can government reduce costs of doing business in Ghana. One of them is about taxation. we all know how COVID, Ukraine, Russia will have affected businesses. We have earlier indicated our capital have been depleted, which has affected economic activities. So we are not expecting government to overburden businesses with extra taxes, but rather government should come up with policies that will see how best he can more or less reduce leakages, revenue leakages in the system, and introduce tax policies that support businesses. A typical example with our sector, the FMCG, we're telling government that your VAT system, your standard rates, your flat rate is not very supportive in our environment because it has a cascading effect.
You're talking of the 19, is it the 19.5 or so, or the 17.5 something?
Yes, it has a cascading effect on businesses. And the uncompetitive nature makes it very difficult for people to comply to that policy. As such, businesses are not actually passing on that charge to the consumer. And we are forced to use our working capital to pay. Government is being short-changed in the market. Businesses are collapsing. It will get to a time government might not be able to realize any revenue in the market. So we are telling government that, can you look at policies that support the FMCG market, either by going back to the sales tax where you take all your revenues at the port of entry, so that non-tax compliance or tax compliance will obviously succumb to the new policy and you can get your revenue. So increasing of tax is not something we subscribe to this time, because government will raise tax, you will not able to actualize the revenue, you will have to go and borrow money, then come back and increase tax again. And we get to the spiral syndrome that we've been talking about. What we want government to do now is to learn of the best practices in our neighboring countries. If you go to Togo, what's their interest rate? If you go to Cote d'Ivoire, what is their interest rate? About a week ago, there was a program in Kenya, and we found out what their interest rate to business was 15%. If Kenya can do 15%, if Togo can do below what Ghana is doing, then it means there's a missing link that we need to go and learn. When we're able to solve all these things, government can realize its revenue so that we can get ourselves from the woods we find ourselves in now. We are not expecting government to increase any taxation now, especially with the E-levy. We told government that this is not a popular policy. Reduce it if still you want to realize some revenues. Government didn't listen to us. Now you see where we are now. So it's not the increment of taxation that causes revenue. It is about bringing out policies that resonate with the desires of businesses, that introduce self-compliances, that will make government maximize on its revenue mobilization. We are also thinking that government can also be very proactive in introducing pro-poor agricultural policies that support local production of food. Government should not just jump to say, I'm placing ban on rice, sugar, toothpaste, when we don't have enough substitute in the country. If we do that, we will create artificial shortages that obviously will affect prices. And where will we go? So there's a need for government to put down pragmatic programs that will seek to address our deficit in agricultural production. Road networks that leads to farmyards must be well constructed.
Right.
Government must markets so that when the farmer produces, there's a ready market to pick it up. When you listen to the rice production people, one of their difficulty is marketing. They will produce it and they will not get anyone to offtake it. They will be discouraged. If they are taking a facility from somewhere, they will be forced to sell their property to pay off. So let's create an environment that supports business growth, that government will have its peace of mind in running its economic agendas. We also think government can also look at leakages at the ports, warehousing, and goods in transit. I've heard government want to reverse its benchmark that it was given to business as safe havens because it wants revenues. It is not that we don't want to pay taxes, no, but there are a lot of mobilization, but there's a lot of leakages in the system. If government can fix some of these things, probably we'll be better off.
Okay.
So we are expecting projects that will probably resonate with the current economic challenges and see how best we can support businesses to see the economy running again.
Right. Interesting points you've made. Let me bring in Professor John Gachi. Prof, so looking at all of these, we're proffering solutions. You spoke about leadership and what role it has to play in this entire conversation. Interestingly, I'm looking at the graphic business this morning, and a former IMF resident representative has some thoughts to share. He is suggesting a ruthless approach to stabilizing the economy. He is Dr. Emmanuel Kuma, and what are his propositions? I just want to know whether you concur. He says, one, reduce the size of government, and of course, let there be a rationalization of the flagship programs like 1D, 1F, like Free SHS, among others. It would be one of his three top priorities. Then two, quickly revamp revenue collections. That is through, let me just get to that page. That is through the rationalization of existing tax handles. That is the second proposition. And then thirdly, urgent appeals should be put through to the country's bilateral creditors for concessionary loans to plug the deficit. So three things, I'll just repeat. Revamp revenue collection, rationalize existing tax handles, appeal to bilateral donors or partners to restructure our debt. What do you make of that?
Well, thank you. I think I want to emphasize on some earlier points made before I come to the statement by Dr. Kuma. I think the thing about agricultural financing is basically about marketing. If you produce, you don't have robust and continuous market for your produce, it means you cannot earn income or you cannot generate revenue. Therefore, you are a risk to financial system. So until we put structures in place to ensure a robust marketing of agricultural produce, agriculture will continue to be a risk area for the financial sector. Now, the reason why cocoa, coffee, and the rest are attracting the funding is because they have the marketing structure. Take cocoa, for example, you talk about the syndicated loan that comes and then it is distributed through the chain to the LBCs, etc. What happens during the signing of the syndicated loan is a marketing issue. It's commitment that you can produce this quality, this quantity at a given time, and you have identifiable off-takers. We don't have that marketing structure for many of our agricultural produce in the country. Therefore, they continue to be risky every season. So that is why I'm talking about leadership. We need to address this issue to provide agriculture as an attractive area for financing by the financial institutions. Without that, we're going nowhere. So that is a critical point I want to make on the financing of agriculture. Now, the propositions are good. We need to rationalize some of our flagship program. Rationalization is not cancellation of those programs, because we know that some of these flagship programs are not engaged efficiently. For example, it is not every productive company that is receiving the 1D, 1F support. So it's a waste of money. So those things have to be looked at critically. In fact, there are friends who have benefited from 1D, 1F. Some of them, they have to repay. But there's no documentation even as to how payment is going to be done. It's as if it's free money. That ought to be rationalized. The policy is good, but the approach towards implementation is geared towards political expediency, and that must be taken away to make the policy more beneficial to the economy. The same thing applies to free SHS. I'm not sure whether the free SHS we are consuming made in Ghana, we are consuming produced in Ghana. These are areas we need to rationalize. The procurement value chain within free SHS is problematic and a drain on the economy. We need to look at that. Do we want to continue the boarding housing system across board, or we want to look at it? And do we want to even look at the free SHS in the current form, where we learn the same traditional thing after the free SHS, the person is not acceptable in any setting within the within industry? Do we want to rationalize all those things? So I think I agree to a large extent. We need rationalization of some of the flagship program, and that also will result in efficient expenditure of public fund. I think you also talk about contacting the bilateral and multilateral partners who have provided funding in the past. That is normally the low-hanging fruit when it comes to restructuring your debt. But I believe there have been some challenges. I am aware that some attempts have been made, and I think the result is not good. That is why we are now focusing a lot on domestic debt restructuring. So if government can present itself more credible to these bilateral and multilateral institutions to have a second thought, that will be fine. But there are some issues that, if you look at it from a rational point of view, take IMF as a multilateral financier as an example, that IMF has given us some funding, and we exited in April 2019. Then in April 2020, IMF gave us 1 billion, convert that into today's exchange rate, a huge sum of money. Then after a year, we have not been able to account for the money that the IMF has provided with a moratorium of 5 years before you pay, 0 interest rate. Then we are not able to provide an audit to show how we have utilized the money. How will you, after a year, go back to IMF that I want you to forgive some of my debt, extend the repayment time? It becomes problematic. So these are the challenges we are facing in terms of the external debt, which we can divide into the commercial and bilateral and multilateral. For commercial, you know already. I don't know how we are going to convince those investors to cede to our demand for debt restructuring. So the idea is good, but there are challenges regarding the external bilateral and multilateral financiers of our economy. If I forget the third one, you can remind me.
You've touched base on all of them. But just a quick one on this bit. There's been talk as well, for the sake of food security, especially when you consider the fact that the World Bank has been telling us that about 1 million people on the back of the economic dynamics in Ghana could fall into poverty and food insecurity and all of that. There has been the call to create commercial farms, maybe in the northern belt, the middle belt, and the southern belt. Some have even suggested that we need about 2 commercial farms per region to guarantee food sustainability, and maybe to feed into what Mr. President said, because it makes no sense for us to import, $400 million or so worth of tomatoes from Burkina Faso. Their tomatoes are juicier. What have we done over the decades to get there? So what is your take on that? Do we need commercial farms?
We need commercial farms, and we need a policy that will enhance commercial farms and protect smallholder farmers. We cannot have a policy that will wipe away our traditional subsistence farmers who use that for their subsistence and use that for some small income to feed their families. So we need a policy that will protect them, and we need a policy that will enhance the landscape for commercial farming in Ghana. But commercial farming without addressing the global, when I say global, I'm referring to our macro elements that are needed to foster an efficient commercial farming environment. If we don't create the environment for commercial farming, they will produce. People cannot ordinarily buy what they produce. So we need to look at the environment we create for the commercial farming sector. Looking at food security and the rest, we also need to be talking about producing to protect the health of our people. Most of the engagement in agriculture nowadays is poisonous to our people. The fish that we are producing, the chemical we give them, they are injurious to the health of people. and that we are getting to a point that we will be spending a lot of money to treat ailments that are associated with our production chain. Galamsey issue is linked to this. We need to address that. And then the ethics in terms of farming, will have to look at that. The chemical that people use, we need to come to terms with the reality that not all the chemicals are healthy to human consumption, so that we achieve food security, we achieve the idea of production to protect the health of our people, and we achieve an outcome from commercial farming that will ensure that we contribute to the economy in terms of job creation, we contribute to the economy in terms of income generation, both for individuals and for the government. That is how I think it should be comprehensive one. We shouldn't just isolate.
All right. Gentlemen, let's look at your quick solutions moving forward, what your proposals will be in that specific regard. I'll start with you, Alfred Amofa. So you've lamented how some gray areas, maybe not gray areas, crucial areas, have been neglected. As the source of funds, the banking sector is not, giving you loans, and it's causing business to sort of contract. What then is the way forward? What are your solutions?
So I think listening to Prof and other people on your show, I think we can have some solution. One, there is an opportunity for producers because now government says it's no more important. So we are looking forward for a dialogue which will be called either by the Ministry of Trade or Joy News or any of the other media houses to bring producers and importers together on a round table and see if a deal could be reached. For example, I'm importing 1 million worth of rice. Is it possible that Western Delta can produce this within the next few months? This is conversation we need to have. So I'm expecting a dialogue between producers of rice and importers of rice around in a roundtable discussion and see what can be done. Now that we have people who are willing to eat Ghana rice, we have people who have money who want to import, but that opportunity is no more there. Why can't we direct the traffic now to local producers, see if you can pre-finance them in a certain arrangement that can be beneficial to both? So what I'm saying is that I'm looking forward for a dialogue, which should be called by the Ministry of Trade. Joy Business cannot even lead that one. Bring the producers, bring the importers, let's sit down and see what can be done for our mutual benefit and for Mother Ghana. So
Okay.
I think that's the way to go.
Right, I get that. I forgot to add very briefly. So how then will this reflect? How do you want it to reflect in budget 2023?
Yes, for budget, I'm also looking, this one is private arrangement. I'm looking at how the importers can now bring some cash to producers to produce for them. But on the government front, we are looking forward for government setting an agricultural fund. As I have said it over and over, we have GET fund for education, we have road fund, we have NHIA fund for health. But there is no fund for agriculture, which we say is the backbone of the economy. So I'm looking forward for government setting down some funds in an agricultural fund that can be used in a certain manner. That will be paid anyway, but that will be quite easier for some of us to assess and pay with some reasonable interest rate. So I'm looking forward in the budget for such an arrangement to be done so that we can have access to financing. Now that we have created market because the option of importation is now limited, we should take advantage of it, both by the private and also by government.
Mr. Amofa, thank you so much for joining the conversation. Alfred Amofa is CEO, Western Daredevil, a beneficiary of the One District, One Factory program. Let me come to Charles. For you, what is the way forward, both on a private level and your expectations from government by way of the 2023 budget?
Okay, so thank you once again. We are in this because of government's inability to raise enough revenue to meet its debt obligations. And we must be looking at how we can reduce unnecessary expenditure and look for revenue in the system. One of the things that we want to propose to government is to look at the tax exemption policies for corporate organizations and even government cronies. It's estimated that Ghana will lose almost about 2.2 billion Ghana cedis on tax exemptions to big organizations that have what it takes to pay taxes. It is also a fact that we also lose money or revenue through financial irregularities in the market. We lose almost about $3 billion that we are looking from IMF. So if government could be up and doing to address some of these revenue leakages within the public sector, probably we could be saving some money. The other thing is about the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which capped government deficit to about 5% to GDP or total revenue. That was suspended because of COVID. If it can be restored to bring some discipline within the fiscal space of government, that will be fine. And we could also be looking at the Tax Exemption Act bill, which have been passed. We want to push government to implement it fully. That we know can also save this country almost about 500 million Ghana cedis. If government is able to rake in some of these revenue, then obviously we will not be overburdening business by introducing new taxes because they want to raise revenue. We want government to look at some of these things, and typically within the FMCG space, we have been advocating that because we need to make food accessible to the ordinary Ghanaian, that VAT policy does not support that. It defiles the basic principles of taxation, which are about equity and uniformity. Within our market, we have zero rated, we have standard rate, we have the flat rate. How could that be in the market? So if they could take away VAT, the VAT, from the FMCG market, and that will make food much more accessible and cheaper to the ordinary Ghanaian. Now what we need is how do we survive? How can we maintain our sanity through food so we can promote Ghana and help government to achieve its economic goals? Basically, some of these things we are looking at. So we are not expecting any new taxes from government, but we want to see how best can government introduce policies that will support the growth of businesses. We have after a secretariat in Ghana, but we are being played off because of cost of production. If we are able to, if Dada is able to produce in Ghana, he cannot export to Togo because it might not meet the competition there because Togo is much more cheaper. Government should be much more exploring other avenues to see what funding can it get for businesses that are much more cheaper to help running businesses in Ghana much more affordable to the businessmen and women in Ghana. Thank you.
Charles, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on this all-important matter. Charles Appiah is Executive Secretary, Ashanti Business Owners Association, that is ABOA. Thank you so much for having joined us. Prof, I'll wrap with you. What is the way forward? Between now, the end of the year, the first quarter of next year, what are some of the measures we can put in place to shore up our economy and which should be reflecting in our budget for 2023 as well?
Well, some of the issues have been raised, so I'll just focus on some other ones. Well, I think we've got into a point that we need to prioritize productivity in the country. Agricultural productivity ought to be enhanced by deliberate policies. I think we do that for rubber, coffee, cocoa, and the rest. There are times that they are able to arrange for cheaper credits for on-levy for farmers. So we need to identify and target crops that meet our consumption needs that we want to promote, especially if we don't want to continue to import 400 million worth of tomatoes from Burkina Faso. We want to see a very clear policy and financial support scheme that will enhance that to take place. I believe that is what we should be doing. Monetary policy should not be distanced away from fiscal policy and our real sector. The monetary policy should look into what is in the real sector, and the real sector should be set up to feed into monetary policy. And it is only then that we will achieve something that will be worthwhile for the country.
Prof, thank you so much for having joined the conversation. Professor John Gachi is Dean of the Business School at the University of Cape Coast. All these gentlemen joined us for our conversation this morning. But there's still a lot more to come. Shortly, we'll be headed to the Malata market. We'll give you the microphone as a citizen, and we'll be interacting with market women to find out what the costs of goods is and how they are faring basically in these economic times. What are they doing? Are they translating the right cost to the end user, the consumer? That, and later we'll also be talking about the latest when it comes to the Director General of the Ghana Education Service and that industrial action. Where do we go from there? All of that still to come on the AM show. Do stay.